Well, obviously, as I've said in my letter, it was a situation really that arose when we went into a policy and strategy meeting, and the minister announcing that he was bringing an MLC into the department, and virtually straight after that, in front of officers, he said, and she's coming in to do housing. And obviously that was my role. So I did my point clear that I'm the elected member who's doing a high policy area for the department. And, I didn't think it was right the way he did it, never mind to bring an MLC in to do a role that an MHK has been doing. And particularly really that they shouldn't, I don't believe an MLC, one department's enough, but to go on to two departments and to sort of want to specify what you do, I don't agree with it. It's totally against the will of Tynwald, I believe.
So that was the opinion of Tynwald off the back of the debates in Lisvane, but Mrs. Masker said she had that advice that said it was fine for her to do that. But just back on the housing thing, why shouldn't an MLC be in charge of housing?
I just feel that it's a high policy area. It's very it touches everybody on the island. It's not just social housing. It's all housing. It's landlord legislation, and I just feel that you need to be an elected member of Tynwald to be able to get the views of the people that have elected you to make sure the right policy and legislation comes forward.
Now, I have to ask you this question. People might be saying you're getting out of the DOI at what might be a good time ahead of an election and with all the things that are going on in that department, some of them very unpopular. What do you say to that?
Right, well, I don't agree with that. Obviously, there's a few people have changed in the last few weeks, their roles. They've gone out of departments that they've only been in for a short space of time, and Jason resigned from DOI. The reason that I've done it is, as I've just said, is I don't believe, I'm a principled person about if I've voted on something in Tynwald, that was the will of Tynwald, so I don't agree with that. With regards to the department and all the other issues, my area was performing well. It was probably the main area in the department that was. It was a big budget, £33 million. It never overspent. We were delivering. We were getting projects completed like Clathfane, and bringing forward policy and working with the local authorities. So, it certainly. I didn't feel there was any reason within my area for the decision taken by the minister. And again, I think that's where perhaps the mistake's been made. It would have been better to discuss with members what the issues were in the department as a whole, rather than trying to bring an MLC in that perhaps wants to be doing the only area that was working effectively.
So do you feel that if you'd have been consulted about a change beforehand, would you have been happy to take on a different responsibility, or were you wanting to keep a hold of housing whatever happened?
No, not at all. And and that option was there once I knew I wasn't doing housing. I think there's a lot of policy to come to fruition. I said so. I was disappointed because obviously coming up to an election, which people are thinking, you want to deliver that policy that you've worked hard on for the last 3.5 years. And I was disappointed that I'm not going to have that opportunity. But the other areas of the department, I would have had to consider, consider them seriously, because there's serious problems in all of them. So
well, you mentioned other areas. We got the news through about Summerhill being closed. You mentioned in your letter, your resignation letter, that was the sort of the final straw. Can you explain what you mean?
Yeah, we do. Obviously, on the department, you get to find out some information. The prom's always been treated as a totally separate sort of scheme on its own. I was aware that Summerhill was going to be closing at some point in the future, and we'd been at a meeting in the afternoon, myself with numerous members from Douglas and my colleague from Onchan, and we were talking about the issues at St Ninians and the backlog of traffic and the problems it was creating for people in Douglas and Onchan. And there wasn't any emphasis put on, and we're closing Summerhill next week. So although we were trying to find all these solutions, so there's a lot of unhappy MHKs about that announcement that Summerhill is going to be closing from Wednesday.
So that was a surprise to you?
So it was a surprise that it was actually happening on that Wednesday, although, dates get mentioned all along. And to be honest, if we're not aware of the date as elected members, what are residents? You know, if we don't know as elected members, the residents certainly don't know that that closure was imminent. So,
Well, I have to ask you, do you get on with the new infrastructure minister? Did you?
yeah, there was no issue, and you know, unfortunately, it seems he's probably been badly advised. I've always worked in a professional environment. You know, I was always in government. I was a civil servant, and there's ways that you deal with things. And I think the lack of respect for both political members in the department to discuss with us the way forward for the future, and to have made these decisions without that, and to have discussed for a couple of weeks with an MLC was just totally out of order.
Well, is this an issue then? If it's not an issue with the minister, who advised the minister? Are you talking about officers here, or?
Well, I can, you know, I don't know that answer. You'd have to speak to him about that. But you know, it could. It seems it was the minister's decision. You know, and I have to respect that's his decision. But I just found it strange. You'd say you're bringing somebody in to help support the department with the challenges ahead, to then give them the area that's actually been working the most effective in the department. So it just seemed like a strange way to go about it. Well, it was, you know, it was dreadful, really. It was handled really badly.